Very good, Paul. Very good. Thank you. You good self?
Very well, thanks. And thanks for being or agreeing to be interviewed.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
What I'd like to ask you about is not your experience of the TLIM program as such, but what you've been able to, or how you've put those materials into action, or how you've implemented those materials since the program. So,
Great. Yeah,
um, and
fantastic.
I'm really looking for just for one or two concrete examples. And I was going to ask you about, with regard to one particular example, what was the context? What did you do? And then what happened as a consequence of you putting that into practice?
Yeah. Okay.
Does that work?
Sounds good. Right. Okay. So let me start. Context. I've got one client, team coaching. I've been
Yeah.
coaching a team for 2.5 years, maybe,
Yeah.
the same team. And I coach the sort of sponsor's boss and his team as well. So I coach him in two dimensions, which is quite interesting. Um, and so I coach his team. I also coach him as an individual,
Yeah.
which is one of the dilemmas that we speak about on TLIM
Mm.
and around team coaching generally. And I drew to his attention the fact that I saw him playing different roles in different teams, very
Hmm.
different roles.
Hmm.
I just asked him what lay behind that. And so that's really the background. We then started to explore in the one-on-one session, but also expanded it into his team session, Cantor's structural dynamics.
Right.
And we started with the four-player model
Yeah.
because that was easy as a reference point to see where how he played different roles, and what lay behind that in particular, and how that was playing out for him and for the team,
Right. Yeah.
uh, or both teams, to be more precise. So that led into conversation around maybe we should do some of this structural dynamics work with his direct reports, his leadership team. And so at the next quarterly team coaching session,
Mm.
I normally coach around issues, proper team coaching, and they're going through a big change program, but introduce some leadership concepts, team coaching concepts. And
Hmm.
so we agreed that we would explore the full player model in particular,
Hmm.
and the various roles that people played around the team. And then we unpacked how that played out for the team as a whole. So some people had a sort of starting gate position of being a follower, but not when they were in their own team, just on this leadership team. And some people were more of a bystander, and others
Mm.
were movers. So we could see the dynamic, and we could unpack the dynamic in the team
So if
and
I can
what that.
just so if I can just stop you there, Dave, can you just give us a brief summary of what you're talking about when you're talking about structural dynamics and what you're talking about when you're talking about four-player model?
Yep. So David Cantor's structural dynamics model, he talks about communications, operating models, and the four-player model. The
Hmm.
four-player model. So we've got the movers, the followers, the opposers, and the bystanders.
Hmm.
Um, and so we could map where people's starting position was,
Hmm.
uh, where they tended to gravitate to,
Hmm.
and what impact that had on the team dynamic, and their contribution level to the team.
Hmm.
Um, so we unpacked that in a sort of very brief theoretical context, but then began to um, put people into positions which wasn't their natural starting gate position.
Yeah.
And that sort of introduced a little bit of fun to something that was, quite serious around the team dynamics and the operating system of the team. So, and people began to, and really resonated for the 2 sessions that we've had. We keep going back to the Cantor structural dynamics model around, are we getting the best contribution from everybody, or are people falling into a sort of natural tendency position? And so they've started to challenge themselves and started to use it as a tool to maybe bring the followers into the conversation and to recognize when they're getting into elongated bystand mode and sort of wheel spinning a little bit. So it's given them a framework, a reference, and a toolkit to be able to self-regulate everybody's contribution in a safe way. So it's given them a framework, a model, and some language which doesn't necessarily equate to being threatening to somebody's manner. So they love it. They keep coming back to it. In the first session, I just introduced the full player model, but the other bits around communication, the communication domains and the operating systems, we unpacked at the next level, because there's quite a lot in all of that. And at the third session, they were beginning to put it together for themselves and understand model clash. It's not necessarily somebody being awkward. It's just a different world view. So they began to really be able to challenge each other. They were, a very polite group of people and would often avoid any conflict. So this is a way that we can understand people's operating positions, communication styles, natural positions, and work with it to enhance everybody's contribution in the team. They love it. They absolutely love it. And so the team leader has introduced it to his boss, which is a team I also team coach quarterly. So expecting the next call with his boss to touch on that one.
Great. So the context was started with your individual conversation and the boss being somewhat unclear about, you said role, but how he was leading the team. You then used the 4-player model with him and then the team, and they've become more, it sounds like they're relating with each other more effectively. They're not doing the conflict avoidant thing. And what's the impact been on the team performance?
The team's going through a massive change, and they're going through 2 big changes. One is an organisational change. The other is they're trying to do some process change and make their operating systems a bit slicker. One of the managers was struggling a little bit, getting overwhelmed with keeping the handle turning and all the change. What it did was allow the conversation that they would have avoided previously. In fact, I've seen them avoid it previously, and rally around and help the manager who has been overwhelmed, and support him, and for him to accept that conversation and not take it as a personal threat, and open a dialogue up to a much richer basis, where they cleared the process backlog they were getting stuck in. People contributed from their own teams to help this manager get out of the sort of rut he was in, not through his own making, but just just a lot on. So the level of conversation has deepened. The level of support, professionally and personally, is deepened, and it allowed them to tackle a problem a deep-rooted problem they'd been struggling with for a while. So in a way that didn't seem confrontational to anybody. And then in the last session, to sort of wrap that up, the sort of kicker at the end was I then introduced the preempting team conflict paper, which is probably a misnomer doing it at the end, but it was the right way for them. I think if I'd started with that, they wouldn't have been ready for that conversation. Having been through the process, then the paper made a hell of a lot of sense to them, and they really started to get into some of the questions.
Which of the questions, or what were the sorts of questions that you were asking them?
Just questions about their where they're coming from, what their preferences, what they view, what they value, what they are looking for, and what they're missing by having a closed or we've all got our own operating model, so which works for most people, but it comes with its own hindrances as well. So they could really begin to understand that maybe it wasn't people necessarily being awkward, but more just having a different worldview. And trying to understand that worldview. There was some cultural nuances around the team as well. It's quite a culturally diverse team from Asia Pacific, and that played out in the dynamics as well. So it allowed us to unpack some of that cultural worldview difference in a way that didn't seem threatening to anybody.
So it sounds like you've done some wonderful work in really helping them to understand each other and to relate to each other differently and to communicate more effectively. And that's shown up in them being able to do a better job in terms of achieve what they're there to get done.
Absolutely. They love it. They really enjoy it. Once they've got used to it, and they actively use it, so they'll call themselves out using the model now, and that's just great to watch. It's just fantastic to watch.
Lovely. Well, thank you for sharing that, David. Anything else you'd like to just share about that experience?
It's a great model. It's a fantastic tool. I've used it with a couple of other teams as well, not quite in as much depth. And once you get over the name structural dynamics, which frightens a lot of people, probably including me, then and start to use it, it's a really, really pragmatic tool. And it's something that's easily translatable and people can grab hold of really quickly. So.
Great.
It's a great tool to use as a coach.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Dave.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
Great to see you.